The sound of that basement door slamming still echoes in my bones. One second I was standing in the hallway clutching my shawl, and the next his rough hands shoved me backward into the dark. "You old woman, you don't belong here anymore," he snarled, before the heavy lock clicked into place. I stumbled on the cold steps, catching myself on the damp concrete wall. The air smelled of mildew and dust, thick and suffocating. My fists pounded against the door until my knuckles ached, my voice breaking as I screamed for mercy. No answer came, only silence, cruel and heavy, like he'd erased me from my own home. 3 days I sat in that darkness, every hour stretching like a lifetime, every sound above reminding me of the life he was trying to take from me. But what he didn't know was that neighbors can hear things, even screams buried deep in the night. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far my story of revenge travels. My name is Clara Johnson, and I am 63 years old. Folks in the neighborhood know me as Miss Clara, the woman who always has a hymn on her lips and a pot of something warm simmering on the stove. I've lived in the same little brick house on Willow Street for over 30 years, and I've poured my life into every corner of it. The roses in the front yard bloom because my hands tend them at dawn. The kitchen smells of cornbread and collard greens because that's how I show love. And the walls still echo with gospel music because Sunday mornings have always been about God's choir. Each day for me begins with prayer. I sit at the edge of my bed, bow my head, and thank the Lord for another sunrise. Sometimes I hum an old hymn under my breath, one my mother used to sing while hanging laundry on the line. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. That prayer is what keeps my bones steady, even when the storms of life shake the roof over my head. Sundays are special. I dress in my best hat, the one with a little pearl pin on the side, and I join the gospel choir at church. Singing with those ladies, sopranos and altos blending their voices, is more than just music, it's family. After service, we gather in the fellowship hall, sharing plates of fried chicken, cornbread, and sweet tea. It's where news travels, gossip flows, and love lives. Even when my life has been heavy, I've always left church feeling lighter. My family means everything to me. My husband Leonard passed away 7 years ago. He was a good man, worked 35 years at the mill, came home with his hands rough and his smile tired, but he always kissed me like I was still that pretty girl he met at the county fair. Losing him felt like someone had taken half my breath away, but I held on, for Marcus, our only son, and for the grandchildren who now run through these halls. Leonard left me this house, and I promised him it would always be a place of love. Marcus, my boy, grew up kind-hearted but quiet, the type who avoids conflict when he can. He married Vanessa 5 years ago, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper words. At first, I tried my best to welcome her. I told myself she just needed time to feel like part of the family. I set her a plate at Sunday dinner, saved her the biggest piece of peach cobbler, even showed her how to season collard greens without drowning them in salt. But from the very beginning, there was a chill in her smile. My 2 grandchildren are the light of my life. Little Leon, named after his granddaddy, is 8 and loves to read comic books on the porch swing. His sister Alana is 5, full of questions and laughter. I keep a jar of peppermints in the kitchen just for them, the way my grandmother once kept for me. Their laughter makes the house feel alive, even when the grown-ups bring in shadows. Being a retired nurse, I've seen the best and worst of people. I know what pain looks like, and I know when someone is carrying malice in their heart. Still, I tried to give Vanessa the benefit of the doubt. I reminded myself daily, patience, Clara. Love her for Marcus's sake. Love her for the children's sake. But little cracks began to show. One evening, while I was stirring a pot of gumbo, Vanessa walked into the kitchen, scrunched her nose, and said, "That smell is too strong." "You know, Clara, maybe it's time you let someone younger handle the cooking." Her voice was laced with something bitter. I laughed it off, saying, "Baby, I've been cooking this gumbo longer than you've been alive." But her eyes didn't soften. Instead, she muttered, "Old habits die hard, I guess." At first, I told myself I was being sensitive. Maybe she didn't mean it the way it sounded, But soon, the little comments grew sharper. At family dinners, she'd look at Marcus and say, "Your mama doesn't know how to let go. She still acts like this is her house." Or she'd smirk and call me old lady when she thought no one else could hear. The most painful part was Marcus's silence. My son, my flesh and blood, would sit there with his fork in his hand, staring at his plate. He never defended me. Never told her to stop. It was as if he'd been swallowed whole by her voice, his own buried deep down. The children, though, they noticed. Leon would sit closer to me at the table, trying to distract me with questions about superheroes. Alana would slip her tiny hand into mine under the tablecloth. They knew when their grandmother's heart was aching, even if the adults refused to see it. Slowly, Vanessa began making herself more at home. She rearranged the living room without asking, moved my late husband's chair into the garage like it was nothing but junk. She claimed the master bedroom for herself and Marcus, leaving me in the smaller guest room as if I were a visitor in my own house. Each change felt like another piece of Leonard's memory being erased. One afternoon, as I tended to my roses, Vanessa stood on the porch with her arms crossed. "You know," she said, "this house would be perfect for Marcus and me if we did some remodeling. You might want to start thinking about finding a smaller place, Clara, something easier for someone your age." I looked at her, sweat on my brow, dirt under my fingernails from working the soil. My chest tightened, but I held my voice steady. "This house belongs to me. Leonard and I built this life together, and his name is still on that deed." She smiled then, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that hides a knife. "We'll see about that," she whispered, before turning back inside. From that moment on, I knew the peace I once had in my home was fading. The gospel songs that used to fill my heart after church couldn't drown out the sound of her laughter echoing through the halls. The cornbread I baked with love didn't taste the same when served to someone who rolled her eyes at every bite, but I told myself, "Be patient, Clara. God sees everything, and one day the truth will come to light." The first real crack in our fragile peace came one evening at the dinner table. It was a Thursday, I remember, because I'd just finished my weekly trip to the farmer's market that morning. I'd spent hours slow-cooking oxtails and butter beans with a side of cornbread that Leon had begged me for all week. The house smelled like home, the way Leonard always said it should. I set the table carefully. China plates I only brought out when I wanted the family to feel special. Marcus sat at the head, Vanessa to his right, the children opposite me. I bowed my head, saying grace with a voice that trembled slightly. When I lifted my eyes, Vanessa was already smirking. Halfway through the meal, she dropped her fork with a loud clink and said, "You know, Clara, why don't you just move to a nursing home? This house is far too big for you." The words stung like ice water poured over my skin. Leon's little fork froze midair, and Alana's wide eyes darted between us. Marcus said nothing. He just stared at his plate, chewing slowly, as if the food in his mouth was suddenly too heavy to swallow. I set my fork down quietly, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Vanessa, this house has been mine for over 30 years. My Leonard and I raised Marcus under this roof. It's not too big. It's just right." She laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Oh, come on. Be honest with yourself. You're getting old, Clara. Don't you want to be somewhere safe? Somewhere with people your age? This house is better suited for a young family." She glanced at Marcus, resting her hand on his arm. "Our family." Marcus shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I wanted to scream, to tell her this house carried the soul of my husband, the memories of our life together, the love I poured into every corner. But I bit down on my words because I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. The children, bless their hearts, tried to fill the silence. Leon said, "Grandma, can I sleep over in your room tonight?" "I like your stories," Alana added. "Grandma makes the best cornbread." Their voices lifted me for a moment, but Vanessa rolled her eyes. After dinner, I stepped out onto the porch to catch my breath. The air was thick and humid, the smell of roses faint in the night. My neighbor, Mrs. Green was watering her flowers across the fence. She called softly, "Clara, you all right over there?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired." But she studied me with those wise eyes. She'd lived next door 25 years, seen Leonard and me through good times and bad. "That young woman," she whispered, "she doesn't talk to you right. I can hear it all the way out here." I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "Don't worry, I can handle her." Inside, though, things were only getting worse. Little by little, Vanessa started pushing me out of my own life. She began intercepting my mail letters from the church, my pension checks, even little notes from old friends. I'd find envelopes tucked in her handbag or stuffed into drawers as if they'd been misplaced. One morning I asked, "Vanessa, have you seen the light bill? It usually comes around the 1st. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh, I handled it. Don't worry about bills anymore." "That's Marcus's job now?" I frowned. "That bill comes in my name. I've been paying it since before you stepped foot in this house." Her lips curled into a smile that wasn't kind. "Times change. You can relax now. Leave the responsibilities to us." But it didn't feel like relief. It felt like erasure. At church one Sunday, I noticed the whispers. Women I'd known for decades who once hugged me after service now gave me curious glances. Later, Deaconess Brown quietly pulled me aside. "Clara, honey, Vanessa's been telling folks you're not well enough to manage the house anymore. She said you're slipping." I felt my knees weaken. "Slipping? I lead the prayer circle every Wednesday. I drive myself here every Sunday. How could she say that?" The deaconess just shook her head. "Child, people believe what they want to believe. Be careful." At home, the arguments grew sharper. One evening, I was sitting in the living room with Alana on my lap, reading from her picture book. Vanessa came in, crossed her arms, and said, "Don't you think it's time for Alana to learn her bedtime routine without you?" "She needs consistency, Clara. You're confusing her." Alana clung to me, her little voice firm. "I want Grandma to read." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You spoil them." "And Marcus doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to hurt you, but I'm not going to sit here and let you interfere." I set the book down and lifted my chin. "I raised Marcus. I raised this family. Don't you dare talk to me about interfering." For a brief second, her mask slipped. I saw the anger flicker in her eyes, raw and unfiltered. But just as quickly, she plastered on a smile. "We'll see, Clara. We'll see." The small battles piled up like bricks on my chest. She moved my husband's Bible off the coffee table, tucked it away in the attic. She threw out my old recipes, claiming they were clutter. She dismissed my friends at the door, telling them I was napping when I was wide awake in my chair. Marcus, my son. He watched it all. Sometimes I saw conflict in his eyes, but when Vanessa's gaze snapped toward him, he'd fold back into silence. That silence cut me deeper than any words. The worst part? She started slipping into conversations with my grandchildren, telling them things like, "Grandma is old-fashioned. She doesn't know what's best for you anymore." I overheard Leon one night whispering to Alana, "But Grandma always knows what to do." It broke my heart that those babies had to carry confusion in their little souls. The last straw came when I went to check my mail one morning and found the box empty. I knew something was wrong. I went back inside and searched quietly until I found a small stack of envelopes hidden in Vanessa's nightstand. My pension check, letters from my sister, even the church newsletter. I held them in my trembling hands and confronted her that evening. "Why are you hiding my mail, Vanessa?" She shrugged, folding laundry with deliberate calm. "I wasn't hiding it. I was just organizing." "You forget things, Clara. I'm helping you." My voice shook. "Don't you dare lie to my face. This is my house, my mail, my life. You don't get to take that from me." She leaned closer, her tone low and sharp. "This won't be your house for long." "You'll see." In that moment I felt a chill run through me, not from her words alone, but from the certainty in her voice. She had a plan. And for the first time, I realized just how bold, how dangerous she had grown under my own roof. At night, when the house grew quiet and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock in the hall, I found myself whispering to Leonard like he was still sitting in his old chair. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, clasp my hands tight, and say softly, "You told me this home would always be mine, Leonard. You promised me we'd grow old together here. And though you gone, I still feel you in these walls." His words echoed in my memory, spoken on the porch one summer evening, long before sickness took him. He had rested his hand on mine, calloused and warm, and said, "Clara, no matter what happens, this home will always be yours. Don't let anyone take it from you." Those words had been my anchor. They were the reason I kept getting up every morning, even as Vanessa's shadows grew longer over my life. Every night, after tucking the children into bed, I knelt beside mine. My knees ached on the hardwood, but I pressed them down and closed my eyes. Lord, give me patience. Give me strength to hold my tongue when anger rises, and courage to face what I cannot change. Protect these babies, Lord, and keep me steady. Sometimes my voice broke mid-prayer, but I never stopped talking to God. I trusted that if no one else heard me, He surely did. Mrs. Green noticed before anyone else. She always had a way of paying attention to things others overlooked. One afternoon, as I was sweeping the porch, she walked over with a plate of fresh biscuits wrapped in a towel. "Clara, baby, you look tired," she said gently. I tried to smile. "Just been busy. You know how it is with little ones in the house," but she didn't buy it. Her sharp eyes scanned my face. "No, honey. It's more than that. I see how that young woman talks to you. I hear it clear as day through these walls. You don't deserve that kind of disrespect." I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "I can handle her. I don't want to cause trouble for Marcus or the children." Green set her hand over mine. Her skin was thin, veins like rivers under her flesh, but her grip was steady. "Sometimes standing quiet is what causes the trouble, Clara. Don't forget that." Her words stayed with me long after she walked home. Still, I had my secrets, and one of them gave me peace of mind. Long before Vanessa ever stepped into my home, Leonard and I made sure everything was in order. The deed to this house, signed and sealed, sat tucked away in a small lockbox under the floorboards in my closet. Only Leonard and I ever knew about it. After he passed, I checked it from time to time, just to remind myself that this home was truly mine. It wasn't just paper, it was a piece of him, his handwriting, his signature. Proof that he had thought ahead and thought of me. When Vanessa mocked me about the house or hinted that I should leave, I'd remind myself of that lockbox. Her lies couldn't undo what was real. That secret gave me strength to keep my chin up, even when my heart felt heavy. Through it all, my grandchildren were my saving grace. I made sure they never went hungry, even if Vanessa forgot to buy groceries. I baked cornbread and made pots of beans stretch for days, seasoning them with smoked turkey wings and love. I sat with Leon at night, helping him with his schoolwork, and told Alana bedtime stories about angels that always watched over little girls. Sometimes, when Vanessa wasn't around, Leon would ask me softly, "Grandma, why does Mama get so mad at you?" And I'd pull him close, stroke his little head, and say, "Baby, some people don't understand love when it's right in front of them. But you don't ever forget your grandma loves you more than anything." It broke my heart to shield them from the bitterness in their own home, but I refused to let Vanessa's cruelty be the only voice they heard. My voice had to be louder in their lives, even if I spoke softly. There were nights I cried silently into my pillow, wondering how my life had come to this. I'd given so much, raised my son, worked years as a nurse, cared for patients who had no one, buried my husband with dignity, and yet here I was, treated like an intruder in the very house I built with love. Still, I never let Vanessa see me break. To the outside world, I held my head high. I still went to church, still stood with the choir, still smiled when people asked how I was doing. Inside, I was crumbling, but I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. There's a certain kind of strength people don't see until they look close. It isn't loud or boastful, It's in the way you keep cooking meals when your hands ache, the way you keep singing when your heart is heavy, the way you keep praying even when you feel unheard. That was the strength I carried every day, and though Vanessa tried to push me into silence, I knew God and Leonard were watching. One night, after Vanessa had thrown away one of my recipe cards, I sat alone in the kitchen, the lamp casting a dim glow. I pulled Leonard's Bible off the shelf. She thought she'd hidden it, but I found it again. Inside, tucked between the pages, was one of his old notes to me. "Clara, never doubt yourself. You're stronger than you know." I pressed that note against my chest, tears rolling down my face, and whispered, "Leonard, I'm trying. Lord knows I'm trying." In those quiet moments, my dignity became my shield. Vanessa could humiliate me, mock me, even lock away my mail, but she couldn't strip me of who I was. I was Clara Johnson. A wife, a mother, a grandmother, a woman of faith. A woman with truth hidden under her floorboards and love that stretched beyond cruelty. And while the world might have started to pity me, I held on to grace. Because I knew the day would come when all that Vanessa had tried to bury would come back to the surface, and when it did, the world would see the difference between her lies and my truth. It happened on a gray Wednesday morning, the kind of day when the clouds hang low and heavy, and you just know rain is coming. Marcus came home early from work, his face pale and troubled. I was in the kitchen kneading dough for biscuits, the radio humming a gospel tune behind me. He stood there in the doorway, shuffling his feet like a boy again, holding a folder in his hand. "Ma," he said quietly, "I need to talk to you." I wiped my hands on my apron and looked at him. "What is it, baby?" He glanced over his shoulder before stepping inside, lowering his voice. "Vanessa showed me some papers, says you signed over the house to us, that it belongs to me now." The rolling pin nearly slipped from my fingers. "What did you just say?" He opened the folder, and there it was, a crisp sheet of paper with my name typed at the bottom, a shaky signature scrawled across the line that was supposed to be mine. The words swam in my eyes, but I knew immediately it was a forgery. A cruel, deliberate lie. "I never signed this," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Ma, I want to believe you," Marcus said, his voice tight, "but the paperwork looks real. Vanessa said you've been forgetting things lately. That maybe you signed without remembering." My chest burned like fire. "Marcus Johnson, look me in the eye. I have never, not once in my life, signed away this house. Your father put it in my name for a reason. I would sooner cut off my own hand than give it to someone else." But I saw the doubt flicker across his face. Vanessa's poison had seeped deep. That Sunday, the whispers spread like wildfire. At church, I walked into the fellowship hall carrying my peach cobbler, and the air shifted. Women who used to embrace me now gave me pitying looks. I caught snippets of their chatter. "Poor Clara, heard she's being moved out soon. Vanessa told me the paperwork's already done." Imagine, after all these years. My heart clenched. Vanessa stood near the punch bowl, smiling sweetly, her hand resting on Marcus's arm. "Yes," she told one of the sisters loudly, her voice carrying across the room. "We're finally settling things. Clara needs somewhere safe, and Marcus and I are taking responsibility for the house now." The humiliation was sharper than any knife. My friends, my church family, the very people who had stood by me after Leonard's funeral, now looked at me with a mixture of pity and judgment, as if I'd lost my mind, as if I were a burden too heavy to carry. I wanted to shout, to tell them she was lying, to run home and pull that real deed from under the floorboards and wave it in their faces. But I didn't. I stood tall, smiled tightly, and served my cobbler as though my heart wasn't breaking. Inside, though, I was trembling. That evening, back in my room, I sat at the edge of my bed and held Leonard's Bible in my lap. The weight of it steadied me. I opened the hidden note he'd left me years ago, his handwriting firm and certain. "Never doubt yourself, Clara. You're stronger than you know." The walls of the house felt close around me, as if even they were holding their breath. I whispered into the quiet, my voice low but steady. "They think I'm weak, but I ain't never been weak." and in that moment I knew the time for silence was almost over. The night after church, I sat in my room with the curtains drawn tight. The whispers still rang in my ears, louder than the choir that morning. Vanessa had humiliated me in front of the very people who once leaned on me for prayers and wisdom. But what she didn't know, and what I had kept close to my heart, was that Leonard had never left me defenseless. I got down on my knees, the old wood creaking beneath me, and pulled up the loose board in the corner of my closet. My hands trembled as I reached for the small lockbox hidden underneath. When I opened it, there it was, the deed. Crisp, official, stamped with dates and signatures. My name written clearly, no forgeries, no tricks. Proof that this house was mine, proof that Leonard's promise to me still lived on paper, not just in memory. I pressed the document against my chest and closed my eyes. "Leonard," I whispered, "they think they can erase me, but you made sure they never could." The next morning I slipped the deed into a folder and walked to the church office where my old friend Deacon Harris worked. He wasn't just a deacon, he was a lawyer, one who had practiced for decades before retiring to focus on serving the Lord. When he saw me, his brow furrowed. "Clara, what's wrong?" I placed the folder in his hands. "Vanessa's been spreading lies. She forged papers, tried to convince Marcus this house isn't mine. But this," I tapped the deed, "this is the truth." He adjusted his glasses, looked over the document carefully, and nodded. "This is airtight. It's got Leonard's signature, the county stamp, everything. Nobody can take this from you, Clara. Not legally. Not morally." Tears welled in my eyes. "Then why does it feel like I'm losing everything?" He reached across the desk, squeezing my hand. "Because lies spread faster than truth. But remember, Clara, truth doesn't die. It waits. When the time comes, you let me know, and I'll be there to help you shine a light on her lies." For the first time in weeks, I felt air fill my lungs again. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't alone. Over the next few days, I noticed small cracks forming in Vanessa's mask. Marcus had always been quiet, but now he looked at her differently. He watched her closely when she spoke, as though measuring her words. One evening, I overheard them in the kitchen. "Marcus, Vanessa, Ma says she never signed those papers." "How do you explain that?" Vanessa, her voice sharp. "She's old, Marcus. She forgets things." "You know that." Marcus, hesitating. "But her signature on the deed looks different, and why didn't I see the notary stamp?" "Shouldn't there be one?" I stood in the hallway, hidden by shadows, my heart pounding. For the first time, doubt had cracked through my son's silence. Later that night, when Marcus passed me in the hall, he stopped. "Ma," he said quietly, do you have anything to prove what you're saying?" I looked into his eyes, the same brown eyes as his father's, and said softly, "Yes, baby. I do. And when the time is right, I'll show you." Vanessa must have sensed her grip slipping, because her cruelty grew sharper. She slammed doors harder, raised her voice more often, and tried to isolate me from the children. One afternoon, I caught her whispering to Leon, "Grandma's confused. She doesn't know what she's talking about. You shouldn't listen to her." Leon ran to me afterward, his little arms wrapped around my waist. "Don't worry, Grandma. I know you're telling the truth." Those words, from an 8-year-old boy, gave me more strength than Vanessa's venom ever could. But still, I bided my time. I prayed every night, asking God for guidance. I could have shown Marcus the deed right then and there, but I wanted more than just private vindication. I wanted the truth to be seen by everyone, the neighbors, the church, the very community where she had tried to bury me in shame. One evening, as I was sitting on the porch with Mrs. Green, she said, "Clara, I've seen you take blow after blow from that woman. You've been patient, too patient. It's time you let folks see who she really is." I nodded slowly. "You're right. She's gotten too comfortable. Thinks my silence means she's won." Mrs. E's. Green's eyes narrowed. "Then it's time you stop being silent." That night, I pulled the deed from its hiding place again and tucked it into my purse. My hands didn't tremble this time. They were steady, sure. I called Deacon Harris and told him I was ready. "Clara," he said, his voice firm and steady, "when you're ready to speak, I'll stand right beside you. You won't face her lies alone." I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet, the house humming around me. I could hear Vanessa laughing in the living room, her voice sharp as ever, Marcus sitting silently beside her. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was waiting for my moment, the right gathering, the place where truth would cut through every lie she had told. And when that moment came, I would not whisper. I would not tremble. I would rise. The days leading up to that moment were filled with a strange, thick tension. Vanessa avoided my eyes now, though she still tried to bark commands. She snapped at Marcus more, sensing his faith in her was cracking. And when she walked past me in the hall, I saw something new flicker in her gaze: fear. She knew I wasn't helpless anymore. And that was just the beginning. The night of the family gathering felt different before it even began. The air in the house was thick, charged, almost as if the walls themselves knew something was coming. I had cooked most of the meal myself. Slow-roasted chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, cornbread, and sweet potato pie for dessert. I worked in the kitchen with steady hands, my apron tied tight, humming an old gospel hymn under my breath. Vanessa swept in now and then, tossing out little jabs about my old-fashioned cooking or how I should just let her cater next time. But I didn't bite. I kept my silence, my strength tucked carefully in my chest like a blade waiting to be drawn. Marcus had invited a few relatives, his cousin Robert and his wife, along with a couple of neighbors who often joined us for big dinners. Vanessa had insisted on it. I realized later she wanted an audience. She thought she'd corner me, humiliate me again the way she had at church. When everyone gathered around the table, the food steaming, the laughter soft at first, I watched Vanessa carefully. She was glowing with confidence, her smile sharp, her voice pitched just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Clara, you really went all out," she said sweetly, carving into the chicken. "But I worry you might be overexerting yourself. I mean, at your age, all this cooking and hosting is just too much, don't you think?" A few guests shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Marcus said nothing, his fork clinking against his plate. I forced a smile. Cooking for family has never been too much for me. It's what I was born to do. But she wasn't done. She set her fork down and clasped her hands together like she was making a grand announcement. "Well, everyone, since we're all here, I guess it's the perfect time to share some good news. Marcus and I have been working on transferring the deed to this house. Pretty soon, it'll officially be ours. We're going to remodel, make it more modern, maybe even build an addition. Isn't that exciting?" The room fell silent. Cousin Robert raised his eyebrows. One of the neighbors coughed awkwardly. "And me?" My heart pounded so loud I thought the table itself could hear it. I looked at Marcus, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders sagged like the weight of the lie was pressing him down. Vanessa leaned back, triumphant. "Of course, Clara will have to make other arrangements. We've been talking about finding her a nice senior home. She'll be well taken care of." That was it. That was the moment. I placed my fork down gently, wiped my hands with a napkin, and stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Every head turned toward me. My voice shook at first, but it grew stronger with every word. "You locked me in that basement like I was nothing," I said, my eyes fixed on Vanessa. Her smirk faltered. "You tried to strip me of my dignity, my home, and my family. But tonight, everybody gonna hear the truth." The room froze. Robert's fork hovered in midair. The neighbors gasped. Marcus finally looked at me, his face pale. Vanessa let out a nervous laugh. "Clara, don't start with your stories." "Stories?" I cut her off, my voice booming now, strong enough to shake the silence. "You think this is a story? You left me in the dark, in that basement, for 3 whole days. My screams carried out into the night, and thank God the neighbors heard them. You thought I would stay silent, broken, but I am not broken. I am not weak." Gasps rippled around the table. Marcus dropped his fork. Wait, what? Vanessa, what is she talking about? Vanessa waved her hand dismissively, her voice sharp. She's exaggerating. She was never... I reached down to my purse, pulled out a thick envelope, and held it high for everyone to see. The table leaned forward collectively, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. This, I said firmly, is the truth. And when I open it, when I show you what's inside, there'll be no more lies, no more whispers. No more pity. Everyone here will know exactly who I am and exactly what she's done. The room went deathly quiet. Vanessa's face drained of color, her hands twitching nervously against her lap. Marcus looked between us, his jaw working as though words were lodged in his throat but couldn't come out. I stared straight at Vanessa, my voice steady, low and sharp enough to cut glass. Your time of hiding is over. Tonight, the truth comes out. And with that, I placed the envelope gently on the table, my fingers resting on the flap. The guests leaned forward, wide-eyed. The air seemed to hold its breath, and I let the silence stretch, heavy and electric, before I whispered the last words of the night. Let's see how brave you are when the truth finally speaks. The room was frozen, eyes fixed on the envelope resting beneath my hand. I drew in a long breath and opened it carefully, as though Leonard's spirit might rise out of the pages. The original deed slipped free, its corners yellowed from years, but its ink as bold as the day it was signed. I held it high, my voice steady. This is my husband's handwriting. His signature, his promise. Leonard Johnson swore this house would remain mine for as long as I live, and here's the proof. Gasps rippled around the table. Cousin Robert leaned forward to read the county stamp. That's official, he murmured. I placed the deed gently in front of Deacon Harris. He cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. I've reviewed this document myself, he said, his tone carrying the weight of authority. It is authentic. The county records confirm it. Clara Johnson is and has always been the sole owner of this home. All eyes turned to Vanessa. Her smile quivered. That doesn't mean anything. She signed a transfer recently. Then produce it, I said sharply. Show us. Vanessa's jaw tightened. She looked to Marcus, searching for his usual silence. But Marcus wasn't silent now. He slammed his palm on the table. Enough, Vanessa. I've stood by you too long. If you have proof, bring it out. If not, stop insulting my mother in her own home. Vanessa's voice cracked. Marcus, baby, she's confusing you. She's not confusing me. You are. His eyes burned, the first real fire I'd seen in him since he was a boy. The neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Farmore Rivers, 7 past stations. Ellis finally spoke. Miss Clara, I've seen you checking that mailbox every day. I've also seen Vanessa walk out there ahead of you, slipping letters in her purse. Mrs. Is? Ellis nodded. And we've heard things. Shouting, crying. We didn't want to interfere, but she trailed off, her face red with shame. I turned to them, my voice soft. Don't blame yourselves. You heard what you were meant to hear. Tonight is when it all comes to light. At that moment, Mrs. Green entered through the open doorway, phone in hand. I didn't want to bring this, she said, eyes flashing, but the time has come. She tapped her screen, and the recording filled the room, the sound of a door slamming. My voice, hoarse and desperate, let me out, please. And then Vanessa's voice, cold as stone, stay down there and think about your place. The table erupted. Cousin Robert shot to his feet, whispering, Lord have mercy. Marcus staggered back, his face drained of blood. Vanessa, that's you. That's your voice. Vanessa's hands trembled, but her tongue sharpened. It's fake. They doctored it to make me look bad. Mrs. Green raised her phone. Time-stamped by my security system, untouched. I met Vanessa's eyes, my hands flat on the table. You left me there for 3 days. No food. No light. Just concrete walls and my own screams. If not for these neighbors, I might not be standing here at all. Marcus's chest heaved. You locked my mother in the basement? The woman who raised me? Vanessa's mask cracked, rage spilled out. She was in my way. She clings to this house like it's hers alone. It is hers, Marcus roared, voice breaking. I pulled another paper from the envelope. Leonard's letter, his words written in steady pen. This home remains in Clara's care for as long as she lives. No one is to move her or take from her what we built together. Tears slid down Marcus's cheeks as he read. Daddy wrote this, and you knew it. Vanessa's eyes darted, searching for an ally, but found none. Even the children stood in the doorway, Leon clutching Alana's hand. Mama, Leon whispered, you hurt Grandma. For the first time, Vanessa faltered. Her shoulders sagged, her voice breaking. I was just trying to build a life for us. No, I said quietly, every word striking like iron. You were trying to build it on my bones. The air in the room turned heavy, as if the truth itself pressed down on us all. Marcus pushed his chair back, his face carved in fury and disbelief. Vanessa, he said slowly, his voice trembling but strong, your lies end tonight. For a long moment, nobody spoke. We all just stood in the middle of what used to be an ordinary dining room, and I realized it wasn't ordinary anymore. It had become a courtroom, a confession booth, a sanctuary, everything at once. The only sound was the little tick of the hallway clock and the shallow, angry whistle of Vanessa's breath. Marcus slid Leonard's letter back into the envelope as if it were a living thing that might shiver in his hands. Mama, he said softly without looking up, I am so sorry. His eyes lifted, locked on Vanessa. And you? I don't even know who I married. She let out a harsh laugh that didn't sound like a laugh at all. Oh, don't be dramatic. You're all acting like saints tonight. What about everything I've done? I kept this house clean. I handled the budgeting. You handled the lies, Cousin Robert cut in, voice like gravel. I've known Clara my whole life. She doesn't scare easy. For her to stand here shaking and still speak the truth, that tells me what kind of storm she's been weathering under your roof. Vanessa threw her hands up. Oh, please, everybody adored Clara before I ever showed up. You were just waiting to pick a side. Well, pick it. I don't need any of you. It ain't about picking sides. Mrs. is Mrs. Green said, stepping forward. It's about naming wrong and standing with right. And you are wrong, Vanessa. Wrong like a crooked fence post. No house can stay plumb on that. Vanessa's jaw clenched. You old people with your sayings. Careful, I said, and it surprised me how calm I sounded. We old people built everything you're standing on. Mr. Mumble. Ellis cleared his throat and set his big hand flat on the table like a judge settling the room. The way I see it, Miss Clara's got the deed, the law, and the Lord on her side. That's a powerful trio. I'm a man who believes in second chances, but not before you face the truth head on. Vanessa's eyes flicked to the hallway where Leon and Alana stood. Kids, go upstairs. Adults are talking. They didn't move. Leon looked at me, not at her. I want to stay with Grandma. Something in Vanessa cracked. You've turned my own children against me, she hissed. What kind of mother-in-law does that? The kind who refuses to let cruelty be called order, I said. Children know where love lives. They can sniff out a lie quicker than a hound dog in spring. I never asked them to choose, Vanessa. Your actions chose for them. Marcus stepped between us, the way his father once would have. Enough. He turned to Vanessa. You will not speak to my mother that way again. You will not lock doors in this house. You will not take her mail, her money, her dignity. His voice softened, but it didn't waver. And you will not be staying here tonight. The words hit the air like a lightning strike. I felt them in my bones. Vanessa's mouth fell open. You're throwing me out? I'm asking you to leave, he said, the calm in his voice more frightening than any shout. For the night, for as long as it takes. I'll arrange a place for you and the children tomorrow to talk peacefully with counsel present. But tonight? You will not sleep under my mother's roof. Not after what we heard, what we saw. You'd break up your family for her? Vanessa sneered, jabbing a finger at me. He shook his head. You broke this family when you forgot what the word home means. She looked around wildly for support and found none. Even the walls felt like they were staring at her. She snatched her purse from the chair and shouldered past Mrs. the Propton. Green, who didn't move an inch. At the door, Vanessa spun, searching for something to throw like a blade. You think you've won, Clara? You think this is justice? This is humiliation. No, I said, rising slowly. My knees ached, but my back stayed straight. Justice is what we do next, she scoffed. Big words for a woman who cried in a basement. I took 2 steps forward and felt my grandchildren press soft against my sides. Their little hands were courage in miniature. My voice carried not because I shouted, but because the truth inside it rang like a bell. You thought my age made me weak, I said, each word measured, but wisdom, strength, and God's truth don't wither. They root deeper. They hold when storms come. You tried to cut me from the life I planted with my husband's hands, but you only trimmed the branches. The trunk still stands. The roots are still drinking, and your axe was made of tin. The room went still. Even Vanessa swallowed. I saw her mask slip just for a heartbeat, and I saw the fear behind it. Not fear of me, fear of being seen. She grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. Then she paused again, catching sight of the neighbors gathered quietly on the porch, faces lit by the dim porch light, Mrs. Ellis with her arms crossed, Mr. Scrost. Ellis solemn and broad, 2 other ladies from church who had drifted over when they heard voices rise. Word had traveled, quick as summer lightning. Evening, Mr. Ellis said, not unkindly. We'll be here a while, making sure Sister Clara has a peaceful night. Vanessa's nostrils flared. You people have no shame. Shame belongs to the deed, not the witness, Mrs. Green replied. Vanessa shot one last furious glance over her shoulder. At Marcus. At me. At the children who looked back with something like grieving in their small eyes. Then she stepped out and slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. A few seconds later, the sound of her car ignited the night like a threat, then receded down Willow Street. Silence followed, heavy and profound. It wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that follows a prayer, aware, attentive, almost holy. Alana's voice broke it first, small as a bird. Grandma, are you okay? I knelt slowly, carefully, and gathered both of them against me. Yes, baby. Yes, I am. I kissed their hair, tasting salt and childhood. And you're okay too. You're safe. The room exhaled. Deacon Harris closed his folder with a soft click. I'll file a record of what happened tonight, he said. And, Marcus, I recommend you change the locks, not to trap anyone. He glanced at me with kind sorrow. But to protect Sister Clara's right to move freely in her own home. Marcus nodded. I'll do it first thing in the morning. No, he looked at Robert. You think the hardware store's still open? Robert checked his phone. They got one of those 24-hour machines. I'll run and grab a set. I'll go with him, Mr. Ellis said. My drill's in the truck. I'll make coffee, Mrs. Ellis offered, heading to the kitchen like she'd lived here all her life. Strong, sweet, and plenty. The house became a gentle hive, busy with right work. Mrs. Green took the children to the living room and turned on a quiet cartoon. Deacon Harris stepped onto the porch and made a few calls in that low, steady voice. The neighbors moved in and out, carrying a kind of tenderness that felt sturdier than any lock. No one said the word humiliation, but I could feel the opposite spreading: restoration, amending. The house lifted its head like a person after a long illness. Marcus hovered near me, a man on the edge of tears. Mama, I don't know how to fix everything I didn't see. I took his hand and patted it the way I did when he was little and scared of thunderstorms. You can start by seeing now. Seeing is the first brick in any new foundation. He nodded, swallowing hard. I'm going to file for separation. I can't have my children grow up learning that love is a closed door and a heavy lock. I won't. He looked at the deed still lying on the table, then back at me. And I will never, ever let anyone stand between you and the home you built again. I touched his cheek. Your father would be proud to hear that. The night deepened. Coffee steamed. The new locks arrived and rattled in the bag as the men set to work. Mr. Ellis knelt at the front door like a shipwright, patient and thorough. The drill whirred, metal clicked, and with each turn of the screw I felt something repairing in me, something old and quiet, trust in the walls, faith in the thresholds. While they worked, I stepped onto the porch alone for a moment. The street was calm, the air warm with that soft Tennessee hum. My roses stirred in a little breeze. I laid my hand on the rail where Leonard used to lean and look at the sky, and I let the peace sink into my bones. We kept it, Leonard, I whispered. We kept our home. Behind me, footsteps, Mrs. K.I. and Mrs. Green touched my shoulder. He's still here, she said gently. I can feel him whenever the truth speaks. I laughed, and it surprised me, the sound easy, unbroken. Me too. When I came back inside, the children ran to me. Leon's face was set in a solemn bravery. I wished he never had to learn so young. Grandma, he said, if Mama has to leave, can we still see her? I crouched to meet his eyes. Of course you can, baby. Your mama is your mama. Tonight wasn't about choosing sides. It was about choosing truth. Love can live with truth. It just can't live with lies. He nodded slowly, absorbing it like scripture. Alana whispered, "Can we sleep with you tonight?" A smile pulled at my lips. "Yes, baby." "We'll have a camp out. I'll tell you a story about your granddaddy's garden and the summer the tomatoes grew so big they made him cuss in the sweetest way." They giggled, the sound scattering the last pieces of fear from the corners. By midnight, the locks were changed, the documents scanned and filed, statements recorded in Deacon Harris's neat hand. People drifted home in twos and threes, leaving behind clean mugs and warmer air. Mrs. Ellis pressed a foil-covered plate of sweets into my hands. "For the morning," she said, "for the first day of after." Robert hugged me, awkward and fierce. "You call me for anything, day or night." Mr. Ellis shook my hand like a fellow soldier. "You won your ground, Sister Clara." When the door finally closed behind the last of them, the house felt full rather than empty. Marcus lingered in the doorway of the hall where he used to run toy trucks and baseballs through a river of afternoon sun. "I'm staying, Mama," he said. "On the couch tonight, if that's all right. I'll take the kids to school in the morning." "It's all right," I said, and meant it. He looked down the hall where his father's picture hung. "I should have seen it sooner." "Seeing late is better than not seeing at all," I said. "God's time ain't a wristwatch," he almost smiled. "You always got a way to fix my heart." "Only because the Lord fixed mine first," I answered. We settled the children in my room, pillows on the floor, quilt piled high, the old lamp throwing a gold circle across the rug. I read a few pages from a book with talking animals and kind endings, then turned it face down on the nightstand. Alana dropped to sleep mid-sigh, a starfish of dreams. Leon lay awake a little longer, eyes on the ceiling. "Grandma," he said, "were you scared in the basement?" "Yes," I told him, "because truth is a habit worth teaching. I was scared." But I wasn't alone. I prayed. I remembered every corner of this house, every hand that built it, every meal cooked in that kitchen. "Love stays even in the dark," he whispered. "I'm glad the neighbors heard you." "Me too," I said, and kissed his forehead. When they slept, I stepped back into the dining room one last time. The deed lay on the table under the lamplight. I picked it up, ran my fingertips over Leonard's signature and put it back in the envelope, then into the lockbox. I would return to its place in the closet, still mine, still safe. As I turned to leave, Marcus stood in the doorway with a pen and a little notebook. "I wrote a few things down," he said, sheepish. "Stuff we need to do tomorrow. Meeting with Deacon Harris. Talking to a counselor. Arranging time for the kids with Vanessa that's supervised for now." He swallowed. "And I'm going to call Pastor Green." We need prayer, guidance, not gossip guidance, I nodded. That's a good list, he hesitated. And Mama, I'm going to tell the church what really happened. Publicly, not to shame Vanessa, but to repent of my silence. I let folks believe lies about you, and I can't carry that another day. My throat tightened. Son, you're not the only one who's been silent. He shook his head. You were silent to survive. I was silent to stay comfortable. That's different. He crossed to me, took my hand, and we stood like that, mother and son, one house, one night, one truth at last. The next morning rose clean. The house smelled like coffee and fresh bread. I stood on the porch while the sky rinsed itself from gray to lavender. Neighbors waved on their way to work. A sparrow lit on the mailbox. The lock turned under my hand with a new sound, a sound like belonging. Marcus took the children to school, and when he returned, we drove to the church. The sanctuary was empty, but for the way emptiness can hold music after the choir has gone. Pastor Green met us at the altar, listened without interrupting, and prayed with us in words that felt like warm water poured over chilled fingers. Afterward, he looked me straight in the eye. Sister Clara, we're going to surround you. Not with whispers, with witness. That Sunday, he did exactly that. He didn't use names or point fingers, but he spoke about honoring elders, about roofs that stand because old hands know where to place the nail. He spoke about repentance that isn't a feeling but a turning. And when service ended, the women who had once avoided my gaze came to me with tears, with embraces, with pies and promises. The church didn't fix everything. No church can. But it remembered how to hold its own. Word made its rounds. Some folks tried to stir gossip, but it died where truth stood. Vanessa called Marcus late one night, voice soft and desperate, promising change, promising better. He listened, and so did I. But promises are seeds. We told her they need rain and time and weeding, and until then, the children would spend afternoons with me, nights with him, and visit her on weekends in a place where anger meets boundaries and doors don't lock. Weeks passed like careful stitches. The house breathed easier. The children's laughter filled the hallway like wind chimes. I baked more, not because anyone demanded it, but because sweetness felt right again. My roses burst into a second bloom, small and scandalously red. I sang louder in the choir, not to prove a thing, but because my throat had room. One evening I sat on the porch with Mrs. Green and watched the street purple into dusk. She sipped tea. I shelled peas. Justice feels different than revenge, she said suddenly. It does, I agreed. Revenge is hot. Justice is warm, I smiled. And warmth stays. There are folks who will only ever know the headline of my story. That's how towns work. But the ones who matter know the whole thing. How a woman's age isn't a weakness, how a basement can be a valley of shadow and a living room, a mountaintop, how neighbors can be angels, how a son can wake up and stand like a man, how a house can survive a storm because its foundation was laid with vows. One night, weeks after, I tucked Leon and Alana into my bed for an old-fashioned sleepover. They pressed against me, soft and warm. Grandma, Alana sighed, I like it when your house smells like cornbread. This house smells like what it is, I told her. Home. Later, after they drifted off, I stepped softly to the doorway and looked back at them. The lamp lit their faces, turning time's wheel in my chest. I thought of the 3 days in the basement. I thought of the slam of the door. I thought of a different sound now, the tiny snores of sleeping children and the distant clink of wind against the chimes. Justice isn't a gavel. It's a key and a new lock. I turned off the light, leaving the door open. The storm had come. The storm had gone. The roof held, and in the quiet after, my home, my name stood where it had always belonged. It had been a few quiet weeks since the night the truth came crashing down, and life inside my home had taken on a new kind of peace, one I hadn't felt in years. Every morning I sat out on the porch with a cup of hot coffee between my hands, the steam curling in the cool air while my grandbabies played in the yard. Leon raced his bike up and down the sidewalk, calling out for me to watch each turn, while little Alana chased butterflies between the rose bushes I'd tended with Leonard's hands in mind. Their laughter carried like gospel music, sweeter than any choir. Neighbors who once looked at me with pity now greeted me with warmth. Mr. Ellis waved from across the street as he carried his tools to his truck. Mrs. Two. Ellis dropped by every few days with a pie or a fresh loaf of bread. And dear Mrs. Green, who'd stood by me in the darkest hour, still sat with me on warm afternoons, sipping sweet tea and shaking her head at how lies could grow wild until truth finally rooted them out. My days returned to the rhythm I loved, mornings spent in prayer, afternoons with my hands in the soil, evenings filled with the smell of cornbread rising in the oven. The church choir welcomed me back with open arms, no whispers trailing me now, only voices joining mine in songs of praise. People stopped me after service to say, "Sister Clara, we see your strength." And I smiled, not because I wanted their admiration, but because I knew my dignity had been restored. Inside my home, the air felt lighter. Marcus worked to rebuild trust, helping me with bills and repairs, making sure the locks were secure. He carried guilt in his eyes, but he also carried determination, and that with enough. The children clung to me often, slipping notes into my apron pocket that said things like, "Grandma, we love you forever." Those little slips of paper were worth more than gold. I found healing in the small things, folding laundry with hymns on the radio, kneeling in the garden with dirt beneath my nails, teaching Alana how to roll out biscuit dough just right. Each act was proof that the storm had passed and the house still stood. One evening, as the sun melted into pink across the horizon, Leon leaned against me on the porch swing. "Grandma," he said softly, "you're strong like a superhero." I laughed and kissed his forehead. "No, baby. I'm strong like a grandmother." And that's enough. Yes, the scars of betrayal would linger, but they no longer defined me. Respect had returned. Peace had returned, and the home Leonard and I built was once again filled with love instead of fear. And as the night sounds rose, the cicadas humming, the children's laughter fading into yawns, I whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. Justice had been served, and life, in all its ordinary beauty, had been given back to me. I've learned something through all this pain, something I want to leave with anyone listening. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Folks see a soft voice, a gentle smile, and they think they can walk over you. But kindness has roots, and those roots go deep. They hold steady when storms come. And respect, well, respect your elders, because one day you'll pray someone respects you the same. Betrayal can cut deep, it can wound your spirit and shake your trust, but truth always has a way of rising. Lies may shout for a season, but dignity whispers forever. I held on to my faith, my husband's promise, and the love of my family and neighbors, and in the end, justice stood tall. My home is still mine, my name is still strong, and my heart is still whole. If this story touched you, please like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your voice too.